Welcome to Your Lettings Journey, a brand new podcast that's essential listening for landlords with property in North London. Now, everyone will have their own unique landlord journey, from the way they get into property to the way they hang up or pass on their keys, and then all the different decisions in between. But along the way, we're all faced by many of the same issues and potential pitfalls. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Ramesh, and together we have a lifetime of experience as landlords, letting agents and tenants that we want to share with you to help you navigate your lettings journey.
So if you're an experienced landlord wanting to make sure that you're keeping on the right side of all the rules and regulations, or if you're completely new to this game and don't know where to start, then this is the podcast for you.
Your Lettings Journey is produced by Belvoir, Enfield and Central Housing Group. For more information, visit belvoir.co.uk/Enfield and centralhousinggroup.com.
This week, we're talking inventories. I still get landlords who say to me, I don't think I need an inventory, thank you. But I've never heard them say, I don't think I'll bother with a deposit. So what's the point in having a deposit if you don't have an inventory to back it up? Let's ask the experts. Enjoy. So this week, I'm joined by Gabriella Walters and Gabriella Walters from No Letting Go, Barnett and Enfield. Hello, guys.
Hi.
Hello. We've had a bit of a stressful time with the IT setup, so if you all look a little bit jaded, that's why. But thank you very much for coming on. And you are obviously father and daughter. Would you like to give us a little bit of an intro? You are. Would you like to give us a little bit of an intro into how you got into inventories and No Letting Go, and what it's like to work together as father and daughter?
Total nightmare.
I said with a bit of feeling.
I got into the inventory business by buying a franchise from No Letting Go. And this was 12 years ago. I had another business which wasn't particularly successful, and I was looking to do something else. So I went to an exhibition at the Excel, which was a franchise exhibition. Okay. And I saw many different types of businesses, from milkshakes to banking to lawns. And then I came across this company called No Letting Go, who specialise in property inventories. I didn't know anything about property inventories, never even heard of one. But I had a chat with them on their stand. They gave me a list of all their franchisees, but at the time was about 20. So I phoned all of them up, asked them how they were doing, what they thought of it. Wow. And nobody gave me a bad report. And so I decided to invest in it 12 years ago, and I bought myself my first franchise, which was Barnett, because I lived in Barnett, and you buy a territory.
Yeah.
But before I bought it, I went knocking on every estate agent's door to see if my services would be required. Now, 12 years ago, there weren't that many people doing what we do today. And I did get a very good positive response to say, yes, we do need somebody to do inventories for it. So I think sometimes you get lucky, you just get into something at the right time. And I think 12 years ago I did. And so I knocked on many doors, and I'm still dealing with the same clients that I opened up with 12 years ago, which is pretty remarkable, actually.
That's impressive. That's always a good sign. Yeah.
And a lot of our business also has gone by word of mouth, because agents talk to each other. And they say, oh, do you know any good inventory company? We need somebody. And it goes around. So we deal with a lot of people in Barnett and Enfield area. Then about 5 years ago, another franchisee in Enfield was selling up. He moved up to the Midlands. Mm-hmm. And it borders on my territory. So I thought it would have been an ideal way for me to expand the business, to buy another franchise and expand my territory, which is what I've done. So I now control Barnett and Enfield. And it's proving very well for us. Yeah.
Okay. And at what point did you get involved then, Gabriella?
So I was actually in teaching. I was a primary school teacher. And, you know, during the summer holidays or during half term, I would help my dad out. Because, you know, originally he was a one-man band and he was doing everything on his own. And as the business expanded, I thought, you know, it'd be really nice to help him out where I can. So that's kind of how it started. And then I decided 6 years ago to leave the teaching and go full time working with my dad.
Wow, that's quite a move.
Massive. Very similar to my dad. I had absolutely no idea. Well, actually, I had also been a tenant myself. But again, I don't really think inventories were a huge thing back then, or, to the depth that they are now, or the importance that they are now. So again, it was like something completely new for me. But yeah, over the 6 years, we've done really well to expand, and the need for our service has got more and more. So yeah, it's been really good.
We now have 5 staff in total that work for me.
Yeah.
And so we cover a wide area. So we cover a lot of work from central London all the way out to Hertfordshire. So we cover a huge territory.
Okay. Now, I know it's probably hard to believe, but I do still encounter every now and again people who don't know what an inventory is. So, I know, ridiculous in terms of landlords who don't really know what an inventory is. So how would you describe a landlord? What would you, not a landlord, an inventory. What would you say an inventory is? In a sort of nutshell, how would you describe it?
It's a data compilation of the condition of a property, okay? And it's also an insurance for the landlord. And it's also a benefit for the tenant, because when it comes to the most useful thing about the inventory is, I believe, the end of the tenancy.
No, she's just asking, what is an inventory, though? Just that's it.
Well, it's
I love the
father-daughter
dynamics. Marvellous.
The data report of the condition of the property.
Okay, yeah, it's a report on the condition of a property. Okay.
Yeah, I would say the information and condition of a property.
Yeah.
Okay. So what sort of things would you put in there? If I said to you, okay, I'm a landlord, why on earth do I need one? What would you put into it? And can I do it myself? What would you say?
Well, the thing about us being an independent source is that our reports are unbiased. We're working on behalf of the landlord and the tenant, whereas if a landlord does it himself, and if there's a dispute at the end of the tenancy, and the landlord that has done it on a piece of A4 paper is not going to stand a chance to try and get any money out of the tenant if his report isn't detailed. I mean, he could say there were holes in the carpet. If he hasn't done a proper report like we do, the tenant could say, well, it was like that when I moved in. And he's got nothing to say, well, it wasn't. So our reports are very detailed, from ceilings, walls, floors, fixtures, fittings, colours of walls, type of wood flooring or type of carpet, everything. The appliances, the meter readings, whether there's smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms, everything. It's very, very detailed report, which we have to have.
I think that's it in a rather large nutshell, but that's brilliant because you covered a lot of things there. Because quite often the pushback that I get most often is that, well, it's an unfurnished property. Why on earth would I need an inventory? But you just said very clearly there about the carpets. Carpets are just one thing that you have automatically in your property, and it could just as easily be laminate flooring we're talking about. But it's the condition. So yes, marking that the condition of this carpet is that it is in good condition. There are no marks, there are no stains, there are no burns. And as you say, at the end of the tenancy, being able to prove that the holes in the carpet are holes that have appeared during the tenancy, and that you can therefore claim some money back for it. That's it in a nutshell, really, I think.
Yeah.
It's a very nice nutshell, but thank you very much. But yeah, because a lot of people don't think that. They think, well, if I have a sofa, or I have a table, or it's fully furnished, then yes, there's things to protect. But I had one landlord once who was moving to us, and he said, I am going to have an inventory because I didn't have one last time. I thought it was an unfurnished property. And the tenant then used my worktop as a chopping block. And they basically it appeared they chopped everything straight onto the worktop. And his worktop was destroyed, and it cost him £800 to replace it. But he had no inventory, or he had a very basic one. And therefore there was no way he was able to to claim anything against it. So, I mean, do you see lots of landlords who do their own, and do you get to see lots of...
Not as often, I think, but maybe going back a few years, yes. But not as often anymore. I think they do like to use an independent company. So I don't think as often anymore.
No, it's not so often. But even today, we still find a stumbling block when we're asked for a costing, a price, and they say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to pay that," and it's not a lot of money. I mean, an average cost of an inventory is around £100. Right, that's not a lot of money for insuring your property against damage or dilapidations, which is what we cover. And they won't spend it. I know the landlords have been hit with so many expenses over the last few years that it's just another bill to the landlord, and they don't want to pay it. Some of them, not all of them, obviously, very few of them.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think at the beginning of the tenancy is when landlords get hit for a lot of additional costs for things.
Yes.
And so the inventory is just another one on top of that. But if you think about it, with the exception of rent arrears, there's very little point in having a deposit if you're not going to have an inventory, because you're not going to be able to win if you try and claim something back.
Yes.
And, cleaning alone, which for me is the thing we see most often, is going to cost more than £100 on any property.
Yeah.
Any property. But I know you guys come in again can come in again at the end in terms of the checkouts. What are the standard things, or what are the most common things that you see that would cause a claim against a deposit?
Cleaning.
I think 95% of claims are for cleaning problems.
Yes.
And the other most expensive thing which comes to a tenant is gardening.
Okay.
They've got a house with a garden and they haven't looked after it, and it's all overgrown and in maintenance because it was in immaculate condition when they moved in. Gardening can be fortune, absolute fortune.
That's really interesting, actually, because I have only tried to claim twice for gardening. Most of the time, people have been pretty good with our gardens. But I remember the first time so the tenancy had started in summer, and it was beautiful. The garden was lovely and it had lots of colour and everything else. And then they checked out in winter and it had been snowing, and so everything was covered in snow.
Course. Yeah.
And we got nothing back for it. They just said, well, we can't tell. Everything's covered in snow.
Yeah.
It looks fairly seasonal to us. So we got very little on it. And then the second time was a bit disappointing because we'd used an inventory clerk to do the checkout rather than the check-in. And the tenants had put a big burning thing in the middle of the garden, in the middle of the back garden, a big burning thing, and all the grass underneath had been destroyed.
Yeah.
And although there was this sort of long scale picture of the garden at the end, the inventory clerk hadn't mentioned anything about this burner and the grass being destroyed or anything else. And when I quizzed him about it, he said, "Oh, well, I'm from the country and that sort of thing is normal."
Wow.
This is Palmer's Green. Why would you not include that? And so, so strangely enough, the DPS referred to the inventory clerk's notes, which said it was in seasonal order, which I found a bit depressing.
Yeah, of course.
But you're quite successful with your garden claims then, are you?
Yes. Yeah. Well, look, our
is there a secret to it?
Our pictures show the before and after. And that's our evidence. That's why the inventory is important, because you've got photographic evidence of everything, which is very, very important, So
we also take minimum of 4 photos, so whether that's per room or even of the garden. So again, I think other people doing inventories and checkouts, they do overview picture of the room. And like you say, you can really miss certain things from different angles. So within our reports and within our training, we make sure that we have minimum of 4, and that really covers every angle. And then we do close-ups. So for example, if there was like the burn mark, for example, there would be a photo purely for that. So we really then just zoom in on anything that needs to be raised.
Okay. And do you do that at the beginning as well? So when you do the inventory to start with, so it's not just do you just do the 4 pictures of the room, or do you actually focus on things that are wrong at the beginning of the tenancy as well?
Yeah, for both. Yeah. So again, if it's an inventory, it will be 4 minimum photos of the overall room. And then, for example, if there's a fireplace, there will be an independent photo of the fireplace. In the kitchen, 4 pictures of the room, and then every appliance has its own photo.
Cupboards,
cupboards we open, we take photos inside, flooring, ceiling. So it's very, very, we've got all the evidence needed. Every part of that room is covered photographically and written description.
Okay.
Light bulbs, Rachel.
Yeah.
No, seriously.
Yeah.
If tenancy starts a tenant and every light bulb's working, and when they leave and half of them aren't, then they're going to be liable to replace them. It's a landlord's responsibility at the start and the tenant's responsibility at the end.
That's a very good point. And light bulbs nowadays are very, very expensive.
Yeah, they're not cheap. Yeah.
It's like £5 a bulb. And you try going back to a landlord and saying, oh, yeah, sorry, that was missed on the checkout and we need to replace these now. It's like, oh, the whole house of bulbs, Rachel. Thank you. You also mentioned something earlier on about noting the colour, the condition, and I think the colour of the walls.
Yes.
Which is one of the, I don't know if it's an old wives' tale, but it was one of the things that I was always taught when we were training, was that if you don't have an inventory, there had been a case of somebody painting all of the walls black inside a property, and there's no way of claiming on a deposit if you haven't said, well, the walls were all white, which is obviously a massive cost.
Exactly. We do that with walls. We do that with pretty much everything, flooring, even appliances. Again, if it is a white fridge or a grey fridge, and we do make some models. Because again, you'll best believe you will get someone taking a John Lewis washing machine and they're going to stick a cheaper one in. And if the brand, the make and the model wasn't on the inventory, they say, well, it's still a washing machine. They could have beautiful, certain door handles or certain materials of curtains and carpets. And if you haven't stated what that is, grey curtain, then they take those ones away, put in grey curtain. So we make sure that our inventories descriptions are very, very detailed. And sometimes we do get landlords telling us very specifics. They give us the real paint name. It's not just Magnolia. It's one of these.
Farrow and Ball.
Wow. Farrow and Ball, yes.
Yeah. And or the same with curtains. Oh, no, actually, these are silk, or these are real, these are velvet. Please, can you state that in there? So it just depends on the property. Generally, yes, it is a wooden door. It is a wooden flooring, but then you get some, don't you, that say, oh, actually, it's parquet flooring, or it's actually, XYZ. So that's something that we believe is very important, is that we are making makes, models, colours, and the material.
That's really interesting, because I know that if you come to replace something, or if you come to claim against a DPS and you say, well, it's going to cost this amount to replace that particular item, if you don't say, oh, well, it was silk rather than polyester, then they might say, well, that's £40 rather than £100. So I can see how that works into it. So I'm just trying to think of all the examples that I've been through. And so you are sorry, because we used to, when we started off, we used to do inventories in-house ourselves, which was partly to save money because we offered them inclusive, but also so that we got to know the properties, because there's nothing that will teach you a property better and make you notice things than actually going around and doing the inventory yourself. So,
of course,
but I do think that to do it accurately, she says, I'm wondering whether to disclose this, but I did an inventory once on a very nice house, and it had a beautiful downstairs cloakroom, really, really nice. And I completely somehow missed that on the inventory. Completely missed this room. Now, that may not seem that bad because it's not like a kitchen with lots of appliances and stuff. But one of the things that happens quite a lot through tenants is that people drop things onto sinks and then crack the sinks. So theoretically, if we'd had the worst tenant in the world, they could have realised this and just ripped out the toilet, the sink and whatever else. But it could have come back with a big crack in it. So at that point, I just kind of said, we're not doing this anymore. Are there things that you see, apart from the landlord saying everything in his house is new, are there things that you see in general as failings on other inventories, or are they generally
I think
pretty
really
good
it's
now?
just the lack of detail.
Right.
And again, photos, we've sometimes are given inventories so that we have the reference to do the checkout. And honestly, we're like, well, what are we even comparing?
Yeah.
There's one photo, it's blurry, and then you read the description and it's one door, white ceiling, white wall. And I just think generally lack of detail and lack of photos.
Okay.
What would you say?
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Mitchell's
the
nodding.
most important thing regarding a checkout is when we do our checkouts is wear and tear, Rachel.
Okay.
Fair wear and tear or excessive wear and tear. It's very important for us to try and estimate whether there's a damage on a wall which is fair wear and tear if they've been there 5 years, or excessive to fair wear and tear if they've only been there 6 months. So that's another thing we have to take into consideration, which is important.
That's really interesting, because again, when you present that checkout to one of the deposit schemes, they will put a huge amount of weight on what is written by the inventory clerk in the inventory, obviously. Yeah. So if you say that something is fair wear and tear or isn't, that really does dictate whether the landlord gets any money back for that or not. So do you take into account things like the number of people who are or who were supposed to be living in that property?
Mostly boils down to the time they lived in there for.
And actually, it is also if it's a family. So children, I would say yes, because you tend to then get the scribble marks on the wall. You tend to get, I don't know, more probably scratches, or
if they've had dogs, cats, pets.
Yeah, so I don't. Yeah, it's more down to the time, but then I do think it then differs if they have children and pets.
Okay. And the other thing that's striking me here is to get all of that information beforehand and to carry out the photos and descriptions and everything else that you do. That sounds like it takes a fair amount of time. So for the average cost to be £100, that actually strikes me as incredibly good value.
Yes.
Well, let's be honest, £100 would be for a 1-bedroom. And that would be unfurnished. Of course, then our prices go up. The more bedrooms, the more cost. The more furniture, the more cost. Because then it's just so much more information. We need to be so much more vigilant. We've got a lot more to be looking at, a lot more data to input. So we would say £100 starting at a 1-bedroom unfurnished.
Okay.
Above that, yes, of course the cost goes up. But I feel like the cost is going up because we're now protecting more of your property and more of your items.
More of our time.
And more of our time.
More of your time.
So, yeah, I think it is a fair cost, and I think it is, I think it's good money for,
It's an insurance policy, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And having been involved in doing them at times, I know that it's time consuming and you have to get it right, and you have to pay very close attention to it. So £100 for me, 1 bedroom or otherwise, that strikes me as pretty good value. And stuff that you have to be really, really careful with. So I think that's good, very good value. Do you do videos as well, or are you just pictures and
No,
text?
we don't. We don't. I mean, there was a thing a couple of years ago about doing video walkthroughs or about doing 360s, and nobody wants to spend the money. It's all an expense today. And basically, nobody wants it from us. Unless you're, high end when you're dealing with something worth millions, there's no call for it anymore. They're not in our end of the market, which are basically, smaller flats and smaller houses. So, no, we don't do them. The agent should do that, but even they're not doing video walkthroughs that much anymore.
No. Okay.
It was a fad.
It was a fad. Yeah, quite often these things are. I mean, the one time I was offered it, I thought, well, I'm not going to sit here and, go all the way through this and then stop and rewind and to get to the right point. I think as long as the description's good.
The only time we did it was during COVID, because they couldn't get people to go into properties, so they would do the videos and send them out. But there's no need for it anymore.
No, there's no need really. And also I think because it's emotion, it's in movement, you're actually missing a lot anyway. Whereas our pictures, like I said, that we captured them from good angles and we do close-ups. And I feel with a video you probably miss a lot actually.
Okay. All right. So with an inventory, you were saying about, I wanted to come back to this. You were saying about the parquet flooring. So I've had that a couple of times with landlords where they've said, this hasn't been described correctly, or that hasn't been described, or there isn't a mark there. That's not a stain. That will come off with a quick brush, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, this inventory has to be done in a timely manner. So do you get that? Because you get yours signed, I think, by landlord and tenant. Is that right? Or have Have I made
Well,
that one up?
what we do is we use an electronic signature for all our reports now. So when we've done the report, we send it through to the tenant to read through. They get a week to read through it, and they can add pictures and text if they need to, and then they sign it, and we get it back as signed. If it's not signed within 7-day period, it's legally deemed as accepted that they've had it and everything in it is correct. But don't forget, when we go and do an inventory, we're only in a property for about an hour or so. Okay, depending on the size of it. Whereas the tenant, who's got a week to go through it, is looking at everything because they've got a week to do that. So we do get our reports back with this has been missed, or this needs a bit, or the door wasn't working, or the window was broken. They're not these things. We're not going to find them all in an hour's period that we're in a property for. So we accept it. Then when we get them back with all these additions that they want to put in, we either approve them or we refer them to landlord. Okay, if it's a technical problem, like the washing machine's not working, we don't test those. But a lot of the time they do say there's a mark on the floor by the fridge. Well, we've already got that in the report. They don't actually read the reports properly, and they'll take photographs of stuff which we've already taken note of. So we just approve it, or we refer it to the landlord as something we haven't seen or something that's damaged or needs fixing.
But yeah, in answer to your question, we will send it to the landlord, and if they do come back, for example, with the flooring, they say, actually, this is parquet flooring,
We'll amend it.
We just say, okay, no problems, or we make the amendment, and then we can reset.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you were saying, I mean, I've always thought that the inventory should be a living document.
Yeah.
So do you refer to that? When do you refer to it? Is it just at the beginning of the tenancy and then at the end when you do the comparison for the check? Should it be used in the middle?
Yeah.
No, because our tenants, once it's been signed, you then can't make any more amendments. And sometimes what we do find is that we go to the checkout and then we say, oh, this is broken or this is damaged. And they say, well, I've already told my landlord that, or I've already told my agent that. We don't get informed of that as an inventory clerk. So we still put it in our report, but we put in the comment sections, landlord/tenant, landlord/agent has been made aware. And then that can obviously be discussed between them, whether they have actually been told or not. So no, we very, very rarely will we get the communication that something has damaged or something has been broken during their tenancy.
Okay. And so I know that you do midterm inspections, as I think Mitchell was just saying there. How often do you do that for people, and do you then use the inventory for that?
Some of our customers, we do it quarterly, and some of them are 6 monthly.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that's asked it's a more of a questionnaire that we do, we take a few photographs with it, is have any of the decorations been altered? So then we would, at that stage, look at the original inventory and think, oh, hang on a minute, they had pink walls in there, now they're bright blue. So we would say, yes, they have changed the decor, or they put shelves up on the wall which weren't there before.
However, we do understand that during your tenancy, that's fine. It then matters at the end of the tenancy that everything is back.
Yeah.
So, yes, we do go to properties and there are pictures on the wall and they have painted a wall a different colour. We note it, that's fine. But, in terms of it doesn't really matter because it only matters at the end of the tenancy that everything is then put back to how it was for the inventory. So...
Okay. But presumably if there is damage, so if, for example, like with the sinks, someone has dropped something and cracked it, you're making a note at that point that there's been because I remember that being one of the things that they told us very early on was the checkout shouldn't have any surprises in it for the tenant.
Yeah, exactly. I had one literally 2 days ago that the towel radiator in the bathroom was hanging off the wall. So I took pictures, all the brackets were broken, the pipework was coming out, and I sent the report to the landlord, and he'd obviously forwarded to the tenant. And she said, no, I actually emailed you this on the 3rd of July. And I told you that the bracket had broken. And I told you, please, could you send someone round to fix it? He scanned through his emails. He couldn't find it. And then he realised this was done in a WhatsApp. So he said, oh, she did inform me. She did try to tell me it was broken and for me to fix it. Obviously, I wasn't made aware of that. So... these are the things we have, but we always put what we see, don't we? we do get it often that tenants are there and they say, but my landlord knows. Yeah, but I told the estate agent. Said, that's fine. We are still going to put it in the report anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's just the way I always try to explain the sense is it's just this is a statement of what it is now. It's not assigning necessarily any fault for it. It's just saying this
exactly. We
this
always
is the
say
condition.
The main things we're looking for on mid-term reports are whether there's over-occupancy, where you've got 6 people sleeping in a 2-bedroom flat, whether they've got dogs and cats, whether they're smoking. Those are the sort of things we look for.
Yeah.
And
Actually,
we do find them.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was something that I was quite interested in because there's a lot of, or there's been an increase in fraudulent applications recently. Obviously, with the increase in mortgages and therefore the increase in rent and everything else, there are people who are applying, and that, or you find at a later date that more people have moved in. So, for example, I was talking to another agent who will remain nameless, and they had let a property to a couple who apparently had no children, and it had 2 bedrooms. And then when they went round to do their first inspection, this couple suddenly had 4 children. And it's like, where did these children come from? But this was an agent doing it. So they did check after, I think, 3 months. They went round to do their first check. Yeah. But I know a lot of landlords who don't do those checks. So because they find them a little bit awkward. So it is good to know that you're not just going around to check the condition. You're actually going to report back on the things that you find at the same time.
Yeah. I think it comes from bad experience. I think a lot of landlords wait for the end of their tenancy, and then they find out that there's occupancy. Then they find out that they were smoking, all these damages
that wasn't reported.
Yeah, and so then, and unfortunately it has to come from a bad experience, and then they go, but we do, when we are doing our inventory services, we do say to them, just to let you know, we do offer midterm inspections if you would like one. And it is becoming more and more common. And now it's actually not coming from bad experiences. It is just landlords saying, I should just do it just in case.
Insurance.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And how long does a midterm inspection take, and roughly how much do you charge?
10, 15 minutes.
Under 10 minutes.
Really? So you don't sit and have coffee or anything with them?
No, they love to offer, but we're like, sorry, no, next one.
We normally get them on block bookings when we maybe do 15, 20 a day.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes, really. Yes. Yeah. Or even more. Put the whole team on them and we'll get whole blocks of flats done.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I wasn't expecting that. Sorry. 15 or 20.
Or we have certain agents that give us all of their properties and they say, can you get them done within the month?
Yeah.
So, that could be 50, 60 properties that we now need to get done in a month. So we will do 10 a day, or we split them between us. So, yeah, it's
so. I was just going to say, so potentially because we always say that communication is kind of everything between landlord, tenant, agent, etc. But actually you potentially have a better relationship with those tenants than the agent does or the landlord.
Yeah. Yes. And we see them quite often, the ones that we do quarterly as well. We go back and they're like, oh, hello again. And it's the same. They see us as familiar faces and we see tenants as familiar faces. So, yeah.
But they do find it an invasion of their privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is. It's different. And I think a lot of landlords find that quite difficult. And a lot of tenants, do find it. And I know there are times when I go around to see people and I think, oh my goodness, you are an adult, you know how to run a house. And I'm coming round and saying, can you show me around so that I can criticize you? Which just feels dreadful. How do you go around that? For any landlord who's watching who thinks I should be doing inspections, I'm not doing inspections, how would you suggest that they approach A, the inspection, and B, the tenant?
I personally always say we are not here to judge. It is your home. How you live is completely up to you. We are here to protect you and your landlord. We are here to report any safety issues, anything that's not, we try to word it in a way that we're actually here to help. This will be on file. So, both you and your landlord has this on record, and that kind of just puts them at ease because, yes, we do go to properties and it is like a bomb has gone off and these people get embarrassed. And we just say, do you know what? If that's fine, how you live is none of our business. We're actually not here for that. We are just here to make sure that you are safe and everything's working. And, we're also here to just, inform your landlord that, their property is being looked after. I think that's kind of how we have to, we do sometimes get the landlords phoning with the gossip of, I've heard they've got pets, or I've heard that they're smoking inside, and please can you go and check it out? And again, we just keep that confidential.
Okay.
We just try to, I think you just have to put them at ease that we're actually not coming round to spy. We are just coming round to do our job. Yeah.
But if we do find out that you've got an extra 20 people living in this house,
there we go. We will be telling.
We will be telling somebody.
But we don't tell them that. I mean, I go into places where they're smoking and they got a dog and they got 5 people. I've seen it, and they've had 5 people and there was only supposed to be 2.
Yeah.
And I make a note of the report.
Yeah.
If everything's good in a report, we get the tenants to sign it. If everything's bad or there's some bad stuff in there, we don't confront them.
Yeah.
We just say, thanks very much. And we go out the door and they sort of, hang on a minute, they've got dogs and cats in there and they're smoking. And we tell the agent or the landlord, but we don't say it to their face because we don't want confrontation.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. But you're also a third party, which I think makes it a little bit easier.
Exactly.
So if you, rather than the landlord doing it themselves, because they would have to say something. So yeah, it takes away that confrontation bit. So, okay. Now you were saying also, and this one intrigued me when you mentioned it before we were recording, about the checkout that you've done where the inventory proved to be super invaluable and it was in the press, I believe. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
I did an inventory for a landlord who had a luxury apartment in Enfield, and he'd let it out to a celebrity. Mention no names at this moment, but it is common knowledge. And I went, and he wanted to take possession of the property because he wanted his mother to go and live in it. So they were going to leave, and they left the place. And I went back in with the original inventory, which is a very full inventory for a 3-bedroom luxury apartment. And they completely trashed it. They had smoked cigarettes and burnt the carpets. They had smashed cut glass sinks. They'd set fire to the oven in the kitchen.
The chandelier was
hanging off the wall. They'd had dog poo all over the place. They did £70,000 worth of damage. And it took me 3 days to do the checkout, Rachel. Normally a checkout would take me a few hours, but there was so much damage. It took me 3 days to do that. And
£70,000 worth of damage.
Unbelievable. So the guy who I did it for was actually the owner, who's a solicitor. And he thanked me very much for my report, and it went to DPS, and he got 70 grand or 60 grand back out of these celebrities. They were on drugs all the time, apparently. Even the other neighbours saying they're always in the hallway out of their skulls.
The neighbours must have loved it.
Oh, no, they didn't, unfortunately. It was a beautiful apartment. And I've never seen damage like it. I mean, it was just total abuse and neglect of a beautiful property. But I must tell you, I do a lot of the higher end properties. I live near Hadley Wood. There's a lot of the top end properties around here. Yeah. And a lot of them are let out to footballers who are here for a transfer. On transfer for a year or so, and they're only young lads, and they have no idea how to look after a nice property. No. And most of those problems are down to cleanliness. They never clean anything. So when I go in and do the checkouts, they haven't really ruined the property, but they've never cleaned it. And it's just.
I would imagine they have cleaners. How do they not have cleaners? That would be the.
We'd be surprised.
Yeah, honestly, it's always those.
I'd be horrified.
I had one guy last year it was a big 5-bedroom house he had round the corner in Hadley Wood, and the landlord said, he's moving out, the tenant's moving out, I want the keys back because I want to put it on the market. So I went round there to do the checkout for him, and the tenant wouldn't give me the keys back. And he was French, and I didn't speak that good French, and he didn't speak that good English. But he'd moved to another 5-bedroom house round the corner. And I said to him, I need the keys back. And he wouldn't give me the keys back. So I found another guy who worked for him, a member of the staff, who said, no, he needs the keys. Why does he need the keys for this property if he's moved out of it? He says he likes to use the washing machine because he hasn't got a washing machine in the new property yet.
No.
And this guy's earning £100 a week. I said, well, go to John Lewis and buy one, for God's sake. And he wouldn't. He was using a washing machine.
If you're
It's so
earning
fun.
£100 a week, you don't need to wash your clothes, surely. You
Yeah,
just go buy new
somebody do it
clothes
for
every
me.
time.
It's so
Oh
funny.
my goodness! Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I can't imagine the life that the neighbours were having at the celebrity place. That just strikes me
Yeah.
as
I'll
horrible.
send you the link for that from the paper
Okay, yeah,
article.
no, I look forward to hearing that one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit of a slur, but I'd always heard that doctors can be a little bit difficult when it comes to how they look after their rental properties. The celebrities, okay. Yeah, when it comes to the damage and the inventory, that just reminded me of something that I had read about a property that had been turned into a cannabis factory.
Yes, we've seen that.
Yeah.
We get
Okay.
those.
So with okay. Because the story I was going to tell was where it had been turned into this cannabis factory and they'd done loads of damage, as they always do to these things. But because there was pretty much no inventory whatsoever, they couldn't claim on the DP, against the deposit. I just thought you must be able to claim something for that. So I was going to go and look into that one, but I haven't done so yet.
Yeah, we, quite funnily enough, it's interesting about saying, whether they do it in-house or whether they use a certain company. And we think actually consistency is really important. As you said, the best way to get to know a property is going in it yourself. So we had a landlord who had one company doing the inventory, and then another company came in to do the midterm inspection. And then at the end, another company to do the checkout. Now, what had happened is in the midterm inspection, very similar to when you missed the cloakroom, the midterm inspection, they had completely missed one room. And what the tenants had done is they had put this humongous mirror in front of one of the doors. So this person going in would not know that actually behind this mirror is a door, and inside that room was where they were using this to grow marijuana. So then at the end of the tenancy, the said mirror was probably removed, and this door, and then this room was obviously completely and utterly wrecked. Yeah, very, very funny. I mean, we found it funny. Not funny at all, being a landlord. So I think that's important. I think it's important to have that consistency of using, the same person going into the property because they really know. We would have gone and we would have been, hang on a minute, I'm sure this was a 3-bedroom. Where's the spare bedroom? There's a massive mirror. Must be behind there. I think that's, we have had a few occasions.
Wow. I mean, that one's going to stay with me now. Thank you. I look forward to quoting that many, many times. But everything that you've said from a landlord perspective, I completely get it. You have an asset that's worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. You need to protect it because it may be the full-on cannabis factory and it costs you thousands to get it right. It may be the £70,000 damage if you've got a beautiful penthouse, etc., etc. But either way, it's a relatively small amount of money to protect something that is worth a huge amount. So I get that completely. I always think people should be doing their inspections midterm to make sure that they can A, stop any damage as it's happening, but B, also note it so that it's not a surprise and it's easier to claim at the end. So from a landlord perspective, absolutely. From a tenant perspective, just clarify, why is the inventory good for them and how much attention do they need to pay to it?
Yeah. So being a tenant myself, I think it just comes down to blame. We don't want to be blamed for something that we have not done. So even my flat, for example, that I moved into, the estate agent did do the inventory, and my property is furnished. And when I then took on the tenancy, we decided to move some furniture around. And underneath the furniture, there were these humongous stains, massive stains. So straight away, took pictures, sent them so that I was covered and that I'm not blamed. And I think that's the same for any other tenant. There could be certain things that were missed, or even something so small like a light bulb not working the day that you move in. And you think, I don't want to then be responsible for that at the end. So I think from a tenant point of view, it's purely just down to responsibility and blame. You don't want to then have it said that actually it was like that when you moved in. No, it wasn't. It was like this. Would you agree, being a tenant yourself?
Yeah.
I think it's just about blame and responsibility.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah,
And you'll
I
be
agree.
surprised how many tenants don't read their inventory. And then when it comes to the checkout, they go, but it was like that.
Yeah.
Did you tell us? No. Did you tell your agent or landlord? No. So please, please take the time to look through your inventory, because you're protecting yourself. You're protecting your deposit. And I'm sure you want your deposit back. So...
Yeah, I think that's the thing. When it comes to deposit nowadays, it's that much harder to claim against a deposit. So as a tenant, you absolutely want to know that if I move that seat, there's a massive stain underneath it. I'm not going to be blamed for that, because otherwise, you could quite easily be. I mean, back in the day, I remember when I was renting, you just assumed you weren't going to get your deposit back because there was no inventory, or if what's the point? I know you're going to keep my deposit. Thank you very much. End of story. But now, unless there's, unless they can prove that XYZ damage was done by you, they don't get to keep your money. And it is very much the tenant's deposit until the point that they prove otherwise, really. So I'm always surprised when tenants don't read it. And I go into them in 7 days and say, have you read this? Are you going to feed back to it? Or should we just assume that it's correct? Oh, I haven't read it. Read it. We'll give you another couple of days, but read it.
And we get to see quite a few properties which aren't particularly in good condition, and we do the inventory for it. We say marks on the wall, chips in the plaster, scrapes on the floor. And if it starts off like that at the beginning, it's only going to get worse. Yeah. Okay, it always happens. Yeah. And the other thing is, when we do the inventory, if we put down professionally cleaned or clean to professional standard, when it comes to the checkout, I normally phone the tenant up and say, look, I'm coming to do the checkout with you next week. Have you had the property professionally cleaned? No, I'll do it myself. I said, well, don't bother, because you're going to get charged for professional clean, because it was professionally cleaned when you moved in. And sometimes I go in there and they're with a mop and bucket and a dustpan and a brush and say, you're wasting your time. Don't do it anymore, because you're going to get charged for professional cleaning, because it was professionally cleaned when you moved in. So don't bother. You'll
be surprised how many tenants lie to our faces and stand there and say, I've had it professionally cleaned. Yeah. And we know because, we have seen many, many, many properties of a professional standard, and, you just have to play along and go, oh, okay. Or you get to the point of challenging them and say, which company did you use? Clearly they haven't got an answer. Have you got an invoice? Oh, maybe. And, these tenants really try to pretend or lie that they've had these things done. And again, we just say, do you know what? Like, you're just wasting your time. You are going to be charged for a professional,
Yeah. No, I think that's very sound. I think in terms of tenant advice for the end of the video, I think that's absolutely perfect. It's like, you may think that your domestic cleaning skills are up to scratch. Once you move everything out after a 4 or 5 year tenancy, just get somebody in to do it. As you say, you'll waste your time and then you'll have to spend money on it. And it'll cost more if your landlord has to arrange somebody than if you phone somebody up to do it. So again, complete waste of money. Don't do it. Yeah. Okay, so my parting question for you guys would be, if someone was coming along and they're new to, or they're just about to get a new tenant in, or they're completely new to landlording, when it comes to their property, the inventory, or how they run it, what would be your one key thing that they need to make sure that they do?
It starts off in good condition. That it has been clean, that it has been reasonably decorated. We don't expect everything to be spick and span and brand new. Well, the world doesn't work that way. But if they started off in reasonably good condition, it'll carry on that way, and then they've got a property they can make money out of. But if they haven't looked after it, it's going to get worse, because we say there's marks on the walls and scratches on the floor, and there's more marks on the walls and scratches on the floor at the end of the tenancy. Well, you can't blame the tenant for that, because it was already like that. So their property is going to get into a bad state of repair. Yeah. So start off your investment with your property in a good stead, and it'll carry on that way. Yeah. Hopefully.
Okay. Gabriella's nodding in agreement there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That's the key point then. Okay, on that note, I know there are lots of other things that you cover in terms of services. We wanted to focus on inventories. So I'm sure we will be coming back to talk to you again about the other things that you do in a future episode. But for the moment, thank you very much. Thank you for going through all the pain that was the IT setup to start with. I don't want to remind you of that, but thank you very much for bearing with it.
Thank you for having us, Rachel.
Have a lovely weekend. Cheers, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, then we'd love your support. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode of the podcast with your friends.
We'd also love to hear from you about any topics you'd particularly like us to discuss. Please send an email to yourlettingsjourney@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening, and see you for the next episode of Your Lettings Journey. Goodbye.
Goodbye.